Hello, y'all. There's one word I like to describe what's going on. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It was from the movie Mary Poppins. That was an interesting movie. Back in the 60s, I think it was the 60s, you know, things were much different then. People loved this country, really loved this country. No matter how you look at it, people love this country. So, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's a long term, but hey, things made more sense back then. Really, why can't we have things that make more sense? Is it unreasonable to ask to sit out on your chair in a sunny day, or look at the moon, look at the stars at nighttime, grill out, have a barbecue with your neighbors? Remember the cars from the 60s? They were some cool cars, whether it's General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler. They were some cool cars. I see people have car shows nowadays with those cars. Some cars you'd think that, when you were back then, can you imagine when you were producing those cars back then? What the people thought that, the cars that are cool now, that people are rejuvenating right now. Can you imagine that they would have never thought that those cars would be cool cars, like the Chevy Nova from the 70s. Now we move from the 60s to the 70s. That car used to be a grocery getter. Now people are using it as a hot rod. Yeah, you have some cool cars. And then you have the AMC, Think about it, American Motors Corporation. No longer in production. They'd have Ford parts, they'd have GM parts, then they'd have Chrysler parts. What a neat combination. But the funny thing is we can't even get a stupid 50-cent piece chip to run a car nowadays, but yet you could take and have American Motors back then where they would put everything together. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That's a neat name. It really is. You like that name or what? But think about it. Things from the 70s and the 60s. The music, the people, the culture. It was just, things were much simpler. You didn't have the computer. The government had the computer back then, but families were closer. You had less divorce back then. You really did. People were more in tune with what's real. People paid more attention to what was real back then. Times were simpler. They really were. They made more sense. People made more sense. Everybody's so busy with their heads in their smartphones. That's why I'm talking about Mary Poppins. It's funny how you can relate Mary Poppins to classic cars. I don't think anybody's ever done that. Mary Poppins and classic cars. That's a good one. Mary Poppins and classic cars. Think about it. She had that huge bonnet hat on. Could you imagine her driving down the road in an old Stingray? The thing, she's holding it, trying to keep it on her head with the wind blowing. Just think about it. Mary Poppins and the Chevy, the Corvette Stingray. She'd really have to fasten that sucker down in a Corvette or something. The wind hitting it. Hold on for the ride. Hold on for the ride.